YouTube live now. You don't. There you go. All right. All right. Good. There's probably those that doesn't have Zoom, so we have good hits on YouTube then.
Yeah.
Oh, probably they find it harder to connect with
Zoom.
with Zoom. So it's
You
good
need a
that we're
password.
streaming.
No, no.
All right, we're business.
All right. All right. So
Hey.
okay, we're gonna broadcast now, Coach. So just introduce quick introduction, and then we're good to go. And Kinito will throw you a bunch of questions.
Let me.
All right.
Hold on, I just want to set this up.
So the attendees are starting to come in now. So welcome to our last session for today. Again, we'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Teddy Villasor and the Dean Kinito Henson, for staying up with me for this webinar. And of course, to the coaches. Of course, we've been a sponge. I've been taking notes also. We've learned a lot about player development, about in-game development, and just chatting with Coach Bill and the difference between the NBA game. So, now the attendees are in. So I think let's introduce. Do the honor, the dean, of introducing Coach Will Voigt.
First of all, good evening, everyone who's tuned in. Good evening, Coach Ariel, who's done a great job in putting this thing together. Thanks to Blackwater, thanks to Hoop Coaches International, and also our sports psychologist, Dr. Teddy Gustillo, who's or Villasor, sorry, bringing everyone together, and then our special guest, Coach Will Voigt. I'm so excited to talk to him because, as we all know, as we remember him, he was a guy who took Gilas to overtime in the 2019 FIBA World Cup in Foshan, China, and his team Angola beating the Philippines 84-81 in a pulsating game.
Broke our hearts.
Not only that, Coach Will Voigt was part of our historic Philippine team that became the first team outside of the Middle East to win the Dubai International Competition. And that happened just last February. He was an assistant coach for that team. And my first question to Coach Will Voigt is, before that, I think, let's listen what Coach Will has to say to all of our listeners and all of our viewers.
Well, I mean, thanks for having me. I think it's great what you guys are doing to help grow the game, and hopefully we've got a lot of participants in the clinic that can take something from what I have to say.
Great shirt, Coach. Mighty Sports Philippines. My question to you, and just one question, is how did it feel coaching Filipino players? And related to that, how did it feel coaching with Filipino coaches?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. One of the things I love about the Philippines is your passion for basketball. I've been a lot of places in the world, and very few have that kind of level of love for the game. And that trickles down to every level. So obviously coaches, players, fans, all of it. So I wasn't surprised. I mean, obviously, I had worked with Coach Ariel before at Phoenix. So I'd worked with his Filipino players in the past, and they were all great guys, really hungry to learn. And it was a similar experience. So, I worked with a college team while I was in Manila on top of training Mighty Sports. And everybody just had such a great attitude. every day came to work, every day came to improve. Really were hungry to learn. And then, the same thing applied to the coaches. So, the coaching staff that I got to work with, obviously working with Coach Ariel and his staff a few years ago. Same experience with Charles and the rest of the staff. Just first and foremost, great people, but everybody, I think, just kind of shared this passion and love for the game, and a curiosity. Everybody wanted to learn, and I don't think anybody was kind of like set, with, hey, we got to do it this way, or this is the way things have to be done, or there's a lot of really great interaction between all of us, because obviously I have to learn how things have been done in the Philippines. So it's that's one of the lessons I've learned from coaching all over the world is things are different. The game is different and it's played differently, and you can't just think that you have some system that is going to apply 100% to just everywhere you go, and you just take it and implement it. So that's very much the experience with Mighty Sport. And then, of course, once we went to Dubai, I mean, I had no idea there were so many Filipinos there. Our first game, and to see that many Filipino fans in the stands and have them cheering and supporting us, it was a really cool experience.
Well, the big explosive question is, did you really submit an application to be our next national coach?
Yeah, I thought there was a clinic. Suddenly I'm getting on my forehead. Those are tough questions. I think I'm on record as saying it. I think that the Gilas job would be an amazing one. Again, just the level of interest in basketball. I think there's really great young talent. That was one of the things that I really enjoyed a lot, was getting to work with some of the, really talented young players who are coming up the system. Obviously, we competed against a lot of those guys, during the World Cup. Andre Blash was also a part of the Mighty Sport team. So, yeah, I haven't shied away from that fact. I think it'd be an amazing opportunity. If I'm fortunate enough down the road to be that coach, that would be great.
Thank you.
Very safe answer. Well, shout out to Coach John Bryant, who's attending this webinar. Coach John is an assistant coach with the Philadelphia 76ers.
And he's married to a Filipina.
Yes. And that
Coach
is my
John.
guy. Yeah. You guys get to see, I don't get to see.
No, we don't get to see him. If
Uh,
you can hear us, Coach John, we miss you. We met each other in Foshan.
I'm unmuting him so he can
That could be
speak to
dangerous.
us. Yeah.
That could be dangerous.
I'm here.
There you go. There you go. He's talking now.
All right.
Coach, we should have a session with you also on player development.
I'm just gonna get up and leave. We're gonna let the real
Support my friend, and then that's it. But great to hear from all of you, and look forward to seeing y'all soon.
Yes. As mentioned, Coach John is married to a Filipina. So your son can play as a local here. So
Yeah, you better
we have to recruit.
get him that passport right now.
Yeah, we had to before he's 16 years old. Remember that.
I will. For sure.
All right,
He's got
Coach.
ways to go. He's only 6 years old right now.
10 more years. You'll never know. Never know.
Hi to your wife, John. Hi to your wife, Allison.
Oh, she's great. She's great. She's pregnant with our third child right now, so we're excited during this time. I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn, and I'm learning from the best right now.
All right. So, Coach, so we proceed with the technicals now, and then we go to question and answer again, and we grill you again later about the Gilas job. So, let's talk about your peel switch.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do the best I can. You know, I've got the coaches board here, so I think hopefully does that seem like a good distance if I'm
Yeah.
drawing on where people can see.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, it's good.
I'll leave the computer where it's at. But before I get into the diagramming, I just think because of the setup that we have here, you know, I just want to talk kind of philosophically a little bit about it, and then we can, you know, dive in as best we can with specifics. But you know, for me, it came. This defense sort of came naturally. You know, I think at this stage, because he's since retired from the Angola national team, so I think I can talk about it. But it really stemmed. You know, we had a player named Reggie Moore, who was a great shooter and a guy that we needed on the floor. But you know, Reggie was in the later stages of his career and admittedly wasn't the quickest guy out there. So you know, defensively, sometimes it could be a challenge for him in one-on-one situations, and especially in Africa, right, where typically we're playing some pretty high level against some pretty high level athletes. And what would happen, and it, you know, I can take zero credit for this because the guys started doing it on their own. But what we would see would happen is when Reggie was isolated at the top of the key or in certain situations, the players were naturally positioning themselves, anticipating him getting beat. And what they would do is communicate with him about where to send the guy, and then they would just switch him. So that was never something I had told them to do. And, you know, it was a skill set that I think we as a staff, and, you know, JB's on here, and I haven't checked who else, but I know Emmanuel Mavoma, who's our video guy, was talking about being on here as well, and another great coach. But basically, it was something that we noticed and felt we could build on. And, you know, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about first as well. So I think as coaches, you really have to start there. And, you know, when we were goofing around, I don't know how many people were in the session yet at that point, but, you know, I mentioned how you can't just take one system and apply it everywhere you go. I think part of what coaching is, and definitely having success at coaching, is to look at your team and figure out where are your competitive advantages. And for me, you know, a product of everywhere I've been has really been that kind of thinking, right? Like, I've primarily been in jobs where I didn't have a lot of control about who the players were going to be. So, you know, if you look at the, you know, what is now the G League, back when I was coaching at Bakersfield, the D League, you know, we had so much player turnover, right? I mean, you're getting guys assigned from NBA teams. We were not a one-on-one affiliate then, so we were being fed by 4 NBA teams. Guys are getting called up, you know, coming into the pool. I mean, there's so much turnover. So to think that you could have this system and just like constantly implement it with totally different types of players coming in all the time, to me, just didn't make sense. And it's a similar setting on national teams, right? You have a certain pool of talent. So, you know, whether it's Gilas, Angola, Nigeria, wherever, you need to work with the players you have, right? So if you have a system and you're like, oh, you know, in our system, we need this type of player. And as a result, you're not, you know, your 2 or 3 most talented players, you're not implementing something that's going to be successful for them. That makes no sense. So that's really, you know, again, where this defense came from initially. So with Angola, we're trying to think of ways of, you know, where our competitive advantages. And one of the things that we noticed early on was they were really good at communicating with each other. And, you know, maybe I think certainly part of that's cultural. You know, I mean, if you ever go to Angola, you'll see, you know, laughing, dancing, talking, like that's just a part of way of life. So now you start thinking, well, okay, how do we use that? You know, how do we use that skill to try to, you know, separate us? And again, they showed us the way. So on their own, you know, with Reggie as the example, they just through communication were sending his guy to where a help defender would be, and then Reggie was naturally switching on to his guy, and it was working. So that's the starting point of all this. So, you know, again, with that in mind, and me wanting to talk philosophically, so that is where this system was based. Now, it's still in my mind in a very like infantile stage. It wasn't, I think it was almost a year before we actually implemented it as our base defense in a game. So, you know, it was more like, okay, what happens if we try it this way? What happens if we try it this way? And, you know, well, maybe it'll apply this. And they were the ones showing us certain things. And you know, we finally rolled it out in a tournament in China. And, you know, this was not our complete men's team. And we were playing Serbia and not their complete men's team. But at the same time, anybody familiar with international basketball would know that, you know, Serbians in general are very fundamentally sound, very regimented, and their systems are top down, right? So what their A team is running is what their B team is running, and so on. And so we played Serbia, and we forced 22 turnovers using this the first time we rolled it out. So it was kind of a light bulb moment, I think, for us. And it's been evolving since then. So that's kind of the backdrop of everything. But, you know, let me just dive into sort of the basic principle of what we're talking about. And again, I can't see participants. So Ariel, you're like the MC of all this thing. So I encourage people to stop me if they have questions. And I Ariel, if you're talking, I can't hear you. So I don't know if you
Okay.
turn.
Yeah, I turned off my mic. So yeah, they will ask questions along the way. So I will butt in. You don't want the camera to be on you the whole time. So that's what you told me. So but it would be,
Who talks to himself in the mirror? I mean, come on.
but,
All right,
but when you talk, you'll be on. So for the participants, yeah.
So here's the basic premise of what we're talking about. All right. So the example that I was just discussing, I'm going to draw that just so everybody has that concept. So, all right, in this scenario, right? Let's say, and it's weird because it reflects opposite, right? With I put it on the screen, but let's say that this is what we're talking about, where this is a matchup that we know is going to be a blow by. So this guy is already communicating him to bring it to him. And then what he will do is then peel to his man. All right, so everybody can see what I'm talking about there. So can people see
we can
that?
see it. Yeah, we can see it. It's the way you diagram it. It's the way we see it.
Okay,
So
perfect.
don't worry about the mirroring.
Okay, good. So you know, essentially, that's the general concept. And now I'm gonna just walk through like a traditional shell, because as coaches, that's, you know, how we normally instruct defense, right? So if you take that whole mentality and now you apply it to a normal shell. So one of the things that I've learned through time, and initially we didn't necessarily emphasize this, but I just drew a middle, you know, a beat middle scenario. And we were doing that. I think I think that for us goes back to that strength of really being good at communication. So now that I've, worked with other teams and see how other teams do when they try to adapt this, I would say that you still want to be a no middle team. So to me, that middle peel switch that I just drew up, that's one of the harder ones. Now we're going to get to beaten middle in a little bit. And that's one of the things that I actually do like about the peel is that in every other defense, you literally, it's like the elephant in the room. So when you say no middle, then it's like, well, we don't talk about if we get beat middle because we're never supposed to get beat middle, right? So nobody has any plan for what happens if they do beat you middle. And inevitably, you're not going to go through an entire game without some kind of middle penetration. So I'm going to get to that in a second, but let's just go traditional shell, okay? And I'm going to draw it and talk about a drill that we do. But so for us, all right, I'm a big believer in 5-man shell, especially initially. I just think when you remove the center from the equation, it changes everything so dramatically. And if you really think about it, almost every defense is going to want their rim protector as the guy rotating to stop the ball, right? So when you do 4-on-4 shell and you pull that guy out of the equation, I just think now you're putting guys in really long rotations, and sometimes that kind of spooks them a little bit, right? So I think, most of the time we don't even get to 4-on-4 shell, right? We're in scenarios where we have to be ultra efficient with what we're doing. Maybe, you're a team on an 7-8 month season and you need to change things up at some point in the mid-season, and you're already good at the principles, you can go to your 4-man shell. But in this 5-man shell concept, so we have some basic defensive principles that we emphasize. I think you can tweak that to what you think your strengths are. But, for me, across, I do believe in this. I think that no matter what, you always need 5 guys reacting to the ball, right? So if you are spread as a defense, you're probably in trouble. And if you think about the reverse of that, the trend of offenses has been to go with bigger and wider spacing, right? There's a reason for it. So, if a defense is compact and you've got an overload defensively, you're probably in good shape. So for us, one of the skills that we emphasize is jumping to the ball always. So we start every shell with just a full reversal. And on every pass, the defensive player is on the perimeter is going to jump to the ball. All right. So for us, we emphasize too, just to keep things simple, it's the angle of the pass, right? So when he passes up the line this way, the angle that he reacts is the same, right? So that pass, that angle. So it's not like he's coming this way with a pass that went up the line. And this would apply, if this was a post feed, then that would apply the same way. So literally whatever direction the pass was made would be this jumping to the ball. And we really literally want them to take a jump. So it's not like a step, because that initial reaction of jumping to the ball, not only is that going to always put you in the right position, and we'll kind of get to that in a second, but it's also going to eliminate getting beat on cuts, right? So good offensive players or good offensive teams, like where they can hurt you, pass, face cut, and then right back, right? So, the great cutting teams, whether that's the Warriors in the NBA or, whatever team, Blackwater, whatever team you want to roll out there, if you look at the clips, that's how they get you, all right? So you're eliminating that. which I think is also good as well, which is why we want that reaction and not like, well, you know, I'm moving there, I'm getting there slowly, like your first step. So, you know, coaches talk a lot about your first step in transition or your first step in offensive rebounding, how important that is. I think it's the same here. Your first step, your first jump in the direction of the pass. So we're just going to do that to start the drill. So it's just a full reversal, all right, bringing it to this corner. And what you'll see, and I'm not going to draw, but I think you can follow along with me. So if we take this wing defender, first reaction is up the line because of an up the line pass. Second reaction would be across, right? Because that is going to be an across the line pass. And then third reaction is going to be another over and down. And what that should do is put him probably right about there. So I think any defense that you talk about, if you've got the ball now here, you want that person in that position. All right. So, you know, you can go to the Kloppenberg, you know, for all the basketball historians, you know, the weak side eye, Bob Kloppenberg, you know, that was sort of the base defense in the NBA for a long time. Also, all the Thibodeau, you know, flooding the area or overloading the area, all that stuff that came about, it puts you right there. You know, you talk about being at the nail. Okay. All of those things happen without having to tell the player, you know, all these weird concepts we just threw out, right? Weak side eye, nail, overload. Those can be confusing, right? I can take a 8-year-old and teach him what I just explained about literally just jump every time there's a pass made in the direction of the pass. And without him thinking about these bigger concepts, he's exactly where you want him to be. All right. So, Harry, you got some?
Sorry, yeah, I thought it up. Sorry to interrupt, but isn't it jumping to the ball a problem when you recover?
What do you mean by recover?
Well, when you jump, so to recover to, well, probably to recover to the ball that's shooting.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So the question is, isn't recovering after jumping to the ball a problem?
You'd have to explain what you mean by is this your question or are you reading somebody else?
I'm reading somebody else's question.
Okay. So I need that person to explain what they mean by recovering, because when I'm saying jumping, you're not on the ball, right? The ball has left. So you're a help defender. Everybody that's jumping is a help defender. So maybe hopefully that answers that person's question. But those jumps are you're not the ball. So I'm not talking about closing out. I'm talking about your man had the ball or you're off the ball, and now pass has been made. All right. So these are the help defenders. This is everybody off the ball, and it's only the perimeter defenders. So one of the things, and again, this is, you know, through time, in the beginning, and I think this depends on your team. But obviously with the big, if he's or she's jumping to the ball, now they're going to get into pretty big overload scenarios, right? Because the wing from this position is getting to the nail, but the bigs are in a more condensed area. All right. So I think if your bigs are jumping to every pass, that's fine if you're going to be a full front overload team, because that's where they would end up, right? If you think about it. Now, my whole thing, and this is why I've adjusted where I'm only doing it with perimeter players. I don't want our bigs overreacting to the ball. So I think in today's game where there's so many 3-pointers shot, I would rather our bigs. So in this scenario, right, we've already done a reversal. We've got the ball now in this corner. I would rather our big, instead of, you know, you could say, all right, we want you at the line, but I think especially the higher level you go where these rim protectors are bigger and more athletic, I don't want him at the line, because if this person shoots it, he's at a rebounding disadvantage there. And I think that these athletes will have no problem getting to the ball from this position in time to stop, anything at the rim. Right? So again, I think that concept will depend on your team. So younger players, go ahead and have your big also jump into the ball, have them at the split line, have them aggressively stop the ball, further out because they're smaller and it's going to take them longer to get there, right? But if you're a pro coach or a high level college coach, and this is, a legit rim protector athlete, they're protecting the rim off of 1 step, 2 steps, right? So they can get there and still hold a good rebounding position on a miss from that corner 3. Okay. So for us, we've got, that concept of jumping to the ball. And then because we're talking about peel switch, this would be the other thing that I think is a non-negotiable in terms of skill set. You have to communicate. So, I talked about it at the beginning. For us, communication was going to be a separator, right? We were going to try to be special on the level of communication that we did, and then put in a system, which is the peel switch, which requires that, right? So if your team doesn't talk, you're not going to have success with this system, okay? Personally, I don't think you're going to have success with a lot of defensive systems, but certainly not this. So for us to get our players talking, we just implement really simple things. And, I've been in a lot of different countries with a lot of different languages. So the big thing is that everybody understands what the word means. The word itself doesn't matter. So whether it's an English word, Tagalog word, Portuguese word, Mandarin word, doesn't matter, right? Or a made up word. As long as we all understand what it means, we're fine. So that's one of the first things that we introduce. So I'm not going to draw it because I think you guys are with me on jumping to the ball. But now on every pass, and this is maybe what that person was asking initially, there's a closeout, right? So each pass, now somebody is taking the ball. And all we are asking is that they call ball. And for us, what ball means is not sort of the traditional thought of ball where you wait until that person has it contained and then they call ball. For us, ball means that you are closing out to it, that you have committed yourself to trying to get there. You could get blown by, right? But what is really important about that in today's game, right? Every offense is essentially the same. Spread you out, use some kind of action that gets you into rotation, and then continue to move the ball until the closeout is so long that somebody gets an open shot, right? I mean, that is today's offense boiled down. So even a half step going to the ball when you didn't need to can make a huge difference, right? So if you're the 2 passes away guy and you took a half step thinking you had to close to the ball, and then that guy is boom right away, moving it to, what we call the hockey assist. Now you've already 1 step in the wrong direction, making your closeout that much more difficult. So the sooner we can identify who's the defender going to the ball, the better everybody is, right? And also to this concept of just getting them to talk, getting them to communicate, because it's going to be big once we get to the switches. So every pass has somebody calling ball, all right? Now, the other part that we're going to build to, these people who are off the ball. So I'll go back to my diagram. I had erased them, but all right. So in this case, right, we're back here. We get that pass made. This player would be calling ball, all right? Now this player, pass went up the line, so they're already starting to move up the line. Now, this is where I think it can apply to whatever your defensive philosophy is. So if you want to be like an ultra aggressive, denial and disrupt kind of team, that's fine. You can definitely do that. So you can extend what he did and get all the way into this passing lane, all right? But then for us, we want that communicated. So we've got 3 levels of help in our system. So that is a deny, right? So I think that would be obvious to anybody. We also have what we would call a dig. And for us, a dig means that you're in a position where if he were to penetrate like that, you've got a hand in the driving lane, right? So you at least have some kind of level of disruption on any kind of penetration there. And then the third level would be what we call a clog. Okay, and the clog would set you up for the peel switch in this situation. So that's why I was saying that first middle penetration, that's the hardest one there is in the system. And I could understand why, especially early on, you wouldn't even talk about this with your team. All right, but you can see based on the level of help, how that would play out. And I'm going to get to middle penetration down the road where it's not coming from the perimeter. So we'll discuss that in a little bit. But, to me, that's your preference. So if you want to deny, go ahead. If you want to be kind of like a pack line defense, then you'd be in what we call clogs. You can change the words to anything you want. But so now we've got them communicating. So everybody would be saying, okay, I'm ball. I'm the person that's determined closing out, or the level of help that I'm giving you off the ball. So if I'm telling you, hey, clog, 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 then that goes to that beginning scenario that I was talking about with our team, where we had a matchup where we knew the guy was going to get beaten, and he's being told because of the clog exactly where his help defender is. So he knows. He's got somebody behind him telling him exactly where he can send a player. Now, clogs can be also, based on scouting reports. If a team has a non-shooter, or if they, a guy that's primarily a driver, then in a scouting report, you can determine him as a clog, just like you can do with a shooter. So even if I'm not a denial disrupt team, they put Steph Curry out there on the perimeter, we, are probably in a denial position just because we don't want to be in a help and recover situation with a shooter of that level, of that caliber. So those are the basic principles. You can add different things. You can add ball pressure to what you're doing. You can add, pistol stance, arms out. There's a lot of different things. And I think once you start getting past communication and jumping to the ball, any additional thing you're adding should be specific to you and your team. And that goes to what I was saying earlier. Whatever your strengths you believe with your guys are, or whatever your personal philosophy is, then that's how you should go. So, if you don't feel strongly about, ball pressure, you shouldn't be trying to implement it. Or if you feel like, hey, we don't have an advantage there, we're not the most athletic group, again, doesn't make sense to be emphasizing it. So whatever you do past that point, just think about your player strengths before you do it. So now we've done our full reversal. That's just emphasizing our skill points. So in this case, we're only going to say that communication and jumping to the ball. Once the balls come back on a full reversal. Now for us, we would start with that middle switch, that peel switch. I'm not going to do that for everybody that's tuned in, because what I've learned through time is that again, is one of the harder ones to do. And you can probably get there eventually, but let's not start with that. So the ball comes back up top to your point guard. All right. For now, we're going to keep our offensive post player just opposite the ball always, just to keep things simple. So we did our full reversal. The ball is back now to this. We're going to put this player in a dig, not a clog. So if he had been in a dig, if he had been in a clog, that's an automatic peel switch, right? Because he's in a dig, to start the drill, we're going to allow middle penetration, all right? That's the dig. Here's the kick out, and this is the first drive here. So on this kick out, this big is moving opposite of the ball to open up the driving lane. We'll get to what happens if they stay on the ball, okay? So that's our first drive, all right? Now here's where the peel switch comes in. So traditionally, defenses are trapping the ball on penetration, right? So anytime somebody's beat off the dribble, your traditional defense is having, usually you're big, but your low, weak side defender rotate across, stop the ball, while the man on the ball who was beaten is staying on the ball, right? So you hope they're maybe on their hip, but whatever it is, he's continuing to follow the ball. So you're putting 2 on the ball. Now, to me, the problem with that, so this traditional drive that we got to, that's the ball, that's your post, all right? That's your big that's rotating across to stop the ball. Now, traditional defense is keeping that there. There's your trap, right, on the ball, okay? This guy has to get inside that big, right? This guy has to drop to split 2. So that's your traditional defense. All right. To me, the issue with that, especially in today's game, is that these players are so dialed in on these diagonal kickouts or baseline kickouts, right? And you can thank Steve Nash for that. But they're what was once thought as a difficult pass, I think at almost every level, these guys can make easily now. So, and they're programmed to think that. So when they penetrate from there, they all think, hey, my release points are here and then maybe here if he doesn't drop down. So if they see a crowd, that's automatically where they go to their release. So what peel switching does is 2 things. One, it's a full commitment to your initial rotation. So one of the things that I don't like about the traditional defense is that this guy here who had to rotate inside the big defender, right? Everybody with me on that? Is then being asked to get back out, right? So he has to, not only does he have to get inside of a big, that's going to be a guard for sure, has to get inside of a big, which is not an easy task. But then on a kick out, he's got to get back out to the corner. Meanwhile, every offense in the world is drilling this every day, right? So you go, I can think of 4 NBA teams now that I've seen that did this in their training camps offensively. So drive, kick, swing. That's their shooting drill, right? So they're training their players this. And that's my point. I think offensive players are so conditioned for that. So this makes this really hard. It also makes this guy not really wanting to fully commit on the inside position for obvious reasons, right? If he's pinned in by the big, it makes it that much harder to get out. So, there's different techniques. I know a lot of coaches talking about top leg, pushing top leg, all these things. Any way you look at it, it's challenging for the guard. So what the peel switch does is that on this penetration, where the big is coming across, right, we're going to peel off this guy. And what that allows us to do is to fully commit
to only one rotation, right? So instead of having these two guys having to rotate in, rotate down to protect, and then rotate back out and back out, there's one rotation and that's it. So he goes to corner. He's fully committed to inside position. The big is fully committed to stopping the ball, which they already were going to do anyway. And then what you see happen, and this is what happened when we played Serbia, and again before the Olympics, but when you peel off of this guy thinks that's the safest pass, right? So he is conditioned downhill, see traffic, and just like blindly skip diagonal. And so you're peeling off into that passing lane. And I think, especially at lower levels, that's a lot of steal opportunities. So what they've been trained that is their safest pass now is kind of what you're all in on stealing. So the last part of all this, I'm gonna put it here just so I don't have to erase that. Okay. This is where you want to peel, because if I continue to follow this, I won't get out in time for that rotation. And that's a really important part. So where we get into trouble are either it's confusing to the players as to whether or not he was really beaten, or this is the more common scenario. You have those guys who take like the concept of somebody rotating for them personally, right? So they're like, no, I had that, like I had that, man. Like I didn't need you to rotate. I didn't need you to do this. And they stay too long with the ball. And that's where the communication part becomes so important. So for us, this is another word. Now, I'm not going to tell you what we say in Angola, but switch, right? Whatever your word is going to be that means switch, that's an important one. And once that is called, that's it. There can't be a discussion. There can't be, like a prideful, well, I'm staying, because everybody's now committed. So once we hear that switch, now it goes back to that, what I just did here. He has to be fully committed to coming inside the big. He's got to be fully committed to coming down. All right. So we have to be all in. So if there's hesitation about it, we're going to be in trouble. Or the bigger issue, there's not enough communication. So if the big is late in calling the switch, we're in trouble. Or it can come from here too. So if especially in like long closeout situations, right? So I'm in a long closeout and it's like a one dribble blow by as a result. He can call the switch. He knows he's got no chance of ever getting back in front of the ball. Boom, communicate it right away. So it doesn't have to be, I don't think there has to be a rule about, well, the switch has to come from the big, has to come from the guard. Doesn't matter. Whoever calls the switch though, once it's called, now we're in a full commitment. Okay. So I'm going to stop there. Ariel, you're the one that can see questions and just see. Actually, you know what? I can too, huh?
Yeah, there's some.
Okay. No,
Can
there's
you
a
see?
lot. Oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. I've got like 15 questions on here. So
Yes.
uh,
There's one
all
on
right.
the. Okay.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go question to question. So I've got one that's about Filipino players. I'm gonna hold on that. Do you think the mayhem or chaos type of trapping defense would be effective in international? I'm gonna hold on that. Do we use peel switch the entire game or only when Reggie is on the floor? Okay. I'm going to talk about that. So this is from Ian. Yeah, I think it's got to be a committed base defense. So I think you can't roll out peel switching as like an alternate defense to try to change tempo. There's too much work involved in getting your guys to be able to implement it for it to just be an occasional defense that we go to. And then his next question is, when a team constantly solves or beats your peel switch in game, what's your next go-to defense? And honestly, I go to that same, the same answer to your first question. That is your base defense. So I can't really think of a time where we're doing it correctly and getting beaten as a result of that. So usually it's other reasons why we might be getting beaten. But to your point, we're not going to switch. Switch meaning we're not going to change the defense. Let's see here. They're coming in fast. I'm gonna have a hard time probably keeping up with this. Okay, what if the offensive player cuts through the paint after the defender jumped to the ball? Okay, so Federic's question was, what if the offensive player cuts through the paint after the defender jumped? He says into the ball. We would say to the ball. That's why we're doing it. So if they cut, you're by jumping to the ball, you're eliminating the face cut, and really that's the cut. People think about backdoor. Backdoors happen with like really poor defense, right? That's a lack of pistol stance where there isn't an awareness of where your man is. So to me, that's backdoors are mistakes by one-on-one defenders. But a good cut is a good offensive move that needs to be handled. And that's how, to me, it's handled. So if your man cuts after you've jumped, that's why you're jumping, is to make sure the cut is behind you and not across your face, so that you're not beaten off of that. Okay. Keep going down. This is from Michelle Philander. Coach, we implemented these concepts this season with our women. One issue we struggled with was when to peel versus when not to. Our help would help, and the on ball wouldn't peel. We started talking about going ahead and assuming the peel. How do you balance on ball accountability versus help? This is a great question, and what we started talking about here. So, Michelle, I would love to know what the level was that you're doing it, but that's really, really cool. So that goes to exactly what I was talking about. You will run into problems if they won't peel. And for me, I personally think you're best using a really aggressive on-ball pressure defense that in some ways is going to force a lot of this dribble penetration. Because when you're in this weird no man's land, you get into what she's talking about. Where the on-ball defender feels like, I'm here, and they stay with it too long. So she says assuming the peel, which I think is a great idea. What I would add to that is if you're assuming the peel, then go all in and be just a crazy ball pressure team, right? And basically what you're saying is like, we're going to be so aggressive on ball that we assume we're going to get beaten off the ball. And that's basically what happened, in our Reggie scenario, right? We assumed he was going to get beat because of the matchup. But I think this applies to every level. I had this conversation with an NBA team who reached out to me, and, the James Harden conundrum, right? So to me, this is like a natural defense for that. You've got like a once in a lifetime one-on-one offensive player at the top of the key. Assume that he's going to beat you, right? So you might as well set your defense in that manner. So instead of like you're trying to take away everything, just be like, hey, take away the 3-pointer, get up in him, which teams are already doing, but then instead of staying on the ball, assume the peel. So hopefully that answers that, Michelle. I really like that one. Gino, how do you defend mismatch situation? It takes a certain kind of player to be able to guard multiple positions. Undersized point guards may be great on offense, but they probably can't hold up in this defensive system. Okay, we have maybe the smallest starting point guard actually, for sure, we must have had the starter small point guard in the World Cup. Jerson Dominguez, 5'9", JB and Iman can weigh in on that. But so I'm going to get to that. The mismatches on the perimeter aren't an issue, right? Because the whole defense is based on handling that. When you get to a mismatch in the post, we're going to get there. But what happens naturally is because you have them already programmed to helping, they will kick him out. So, we talk about kicking these smaller players out. If they start getting taken to the post, somebody is going to switch with them off the ball and move them out to the perimeter. All right. We'll get there. But that's a really, really good question. Clarence had the same question. Frederick, how effective will the peel switch defense be in high school basketball? Unbelievably would be my answer. Because of the scenario we just talked about, you don't have the huge size differences that require another level of switching. So at the high school level, there's more similarity in size. So, obviously I'm biased, but to me, I think it's the perfect defense at the high school level. Iman had that same question. So we got that answer. Gino, do you have rules in switching defense? How many rules do you have? I think we talked about the only rule is the communication part for right now. If somebody says switch or whatever, I would encourage you to not have the word be switch, just because you really we're all in a clinic, so we know what we're doing, but you roll this defense out and a lot of teams will have no idea what you're doing. It will be very confusing for them offensively to figure out. And I think especially at a high school level, they're not going to know. So I would choose a word that's not switch. Man, these things are coming in fast. Okay.
Teddy can help
Are
you
you
out.
are you deleting some of them? Is that what's happening? Some of them are disappearing.
If you answered it, I
Okay. All right. Ricky, in this peel switching coach, do you send people inside? So go hard. Oh, so the problem is another one comes up and all right, here we go. Go
There you
hard on three closeouts so we take away the threes, or the protect the paint challenge. Okay. Good question, Ricky. So to me, and I talked about in the diagram, what makes peel switching great is that now there's only one rotation and it's a shorter rotation. To me, that's modern offensive basketball. Is they're trying to get you into a long rotation, and eventually you're closing out at such a distance that that person is either going to have a three as a result or a blow by in which you can't get to the ball in time because it was just so fast. So to your question about, hey, would you just run continue to run everyone off the line and continue to peel? I would not. I think, and I'll tell you exactly what we do. Our closeouts are going to be based on that shooter. So there are certain shooters that we're running off the line, but there are other shooters that we're not, and we would want you in a short closeout and a contain. So we're not going to be in across the board philosophy. Now, what I would say is, I think in today's game, it's a hard argument to, the old school days of chop your feet and hands high I don't think it applies anymore to today's game. I think you have either a guy that's going to shoot, in which case chopping with your hands up will do nothing to deter them from shooting, or you have a guy that's really good at like just rip and go on the closeout. So for us, I want more of an extreme in your closeout. So either it is a shooter and you need to get out there and get them off the line. And then there's a conversation on that too. So in the early days of that, I think leaving your feet, and we would talk about that with our team, leaving your feet, angling your body correctly. So you need to lead with the correct hand, because let's say I have a right hand shooter and I'm flying out to him and I use my left hand to try to run out. That's naturally going to turn my body, which is perfect, right? Now, if I try to do that with my right hand, so they're a right hand shooter, right? So keep in mind the mirror image. They're shooting from this side with their right hand. I come this side. To get there, I'm doing this. I'm bringing my body into their body, right? So that's the potential for fouling. So for us, we were totally okay. Leave your feet as long as it's with their correct hand. I think now, I'm really starting to think a lot, and I've seen, David Vanderpool, who's the associate head coach for the Timberwolves. I saw him talk about, we did a presentation together last summer. I saw him talk about getting into the body. I know that Pop, that's been an adjustment they've made in San Antonio about not leaving your feet, but getting into the shot pocket, right? So they cannot get it up. So, literally getting there. Mike Dunlap used to teach that at Metro State, where we would literally get hands on them. Now, that was a long time ago where, officiating was a little bit different. So I think depending on your league, obviously a lot of places, if you're coming and you're touching on a closeout, you're going to get whistled. So that's a discussion. But, going back to Ricky's question, I would not universally chase everybody off the line or universally protect everybody on a closeout. I would do it based on scouting report. But to your point, we're prepared on a blow by, because peel switching, that's essentially what you're doing. Okay, my guy, Wayne Laughley. So first of all, this is a birthday shout out to Wayne, dear friend. Wayne is and I grew up together in Vermont. Wayne also coached John Bryant with the Vermont Frosties, so it's all tied together. But great to see Wayne up on here. On that drive, you're denying the corner three. Could you peel switch on the drive with the corner defender, thus leaving the big staying home? Leave it to Wayne, the professor. So yeah, we're getting ahead with that question, but I like the questions are pouring in. So I think this is way better than me just talk without answering your questions. So, all right, to Wayne's point, absolutely. So ball here, we're here, there's a corner. Now, just like we drew, traditional is keeping that corner guy denied, right? And so, again, learning from our guys. So, and I was a coach, I came from the Spurs system, and we were heavy strong side deny. Most teams, I think, continued to be a strong side deny. And what we were seeing, with our guys, what they naturally would want to come off. So I think that there are scenarios, but to me, the strong side corner now is the same as what we're talking about here. And it's based on who is that guy. So if that's Steph Curry in the strong side corner, we're in a denial, right? But if that's a player who we can be in a clogged position, then that's a corner switch with the big staying home. Now, here's also what I learned from that. And I just came up with this during my time in Germany. We were calling that a switch as well. Now, the problem with that, right, is it's a little confusing for the weak side defenders, because to them, and I already drew it. Switch to them meant big rotating, meaning I got to get inside, meaning I have to get here. So they would start to do that, even though we had handled it just with these two guys. So I believe, I want to make sure I give credit to the right person, but TJ DeLeo, whose father, Tony, is a longtime coach now with the Wizards. TJ is the one that came up with just calling, oh no, you know what? Wrong shout out. I'm giving too much credit to TJ. Brady Bergeson. So I don't know if Brady's on here. Brady coaches at Regis University in the RMAC Division II school in Colorado. Brady is the one, over a phone conversation that we had regarding peel switch, that he's the one that came up with that idea. Call it corner, or call it something different, I think is the right answer. But for us, we would call that corner. So a corner switch is just that. To Wayne's point, now that everybody can stay home on the weak side, and you can do it here. All right, now with the corner switch, this is important. If you peel too soon, that's a challenge for him to get there. Okay, so on the corner switch, the free throw line is kind of what we want to think of when you peel off of it. All right, now the other part of the corner switch is that if they start figuring out what you're doing and he cuts, when you go to switch, then you switch back to your own. So even if I started to peel, if there's a cutter, I would come back. And what will happen is it's going to be a late peel, but it'll come from the bit. Okay, so that's, that's advanced. I wouldn't necessarily do that in the beginning, but this is kind of my point. And I can't remember who it was that had the question about what happens when you have a little point guard and he's taken down. And I was like, well, you'll kick him out. What you'll find is just that base template we talked about. The concept of peeling and switching gets them to always be kind of like in a mode of helping each other. They will naturally start doing things that you had either never taught, maybe you never even thought about doing, simply because they're communicating, right? All they need to do is communicate. So we've got two things. Switch, again, I would make it a different word, but your switch call and your corner switch call. And as long as they're doing that, it could come in different ways and they'll sort it out. And you'll be amazed at how well they do it without specific ways of handling it. So anyway, Wayne, that's a good one there. Iman, doesn't matter who calls the switches. Yes. So I know so Iman, again, is our video coordinator on the national team, rising star in the coaching profession, based in Paris, France. In the early stages, and that's what I'm saying to everybody, this is evolving. I mean, I told you, I learned things from Germany just a couple of months ago. So in the early stages as a staff with Angola, I think we were really hey, who should call the switch? It should be definite. What I've now come to is the thought that it doesn't matter who calls it. But what does matter goes back to Michelle's question. Once it's called, you have to peel. So if you stay on the ball, we're going to have problems. So it's better to over peel and over switch than to not. All right, Frederick. Also, is the peel switch based on a zone or man-to-man defense? It's for us based on a man-to-man defense. Although, if you really think about it, that's kind of what zone is, right? So if I'm the top of the zone and I was beaten, I wouldn't follow it down, right? I would have left it at some point to get back to the perimeter. That's essentially exactly what we're doing, but we never do conceptually talk about it within a zone. Luis Gonzalez, can you share a controlled drill outline for the peel switching before going live? So that's what we started to do at the beginning. I put you in the shell. So our initial shell is exactly that. And just because I like this question and answer setup we've got going on, I'm not going to go through it because it would take me a while. I'll direct you, coaching you last summer, coaching you live. I did do a presentation with players on that. I also did it in the Philippines. So anybody that was at the clinic that I did, I guess that would have been in February. I don't know if Coach Pat is on here. He said he was going to jump on. So shout out to Coach Pat, but he should have that film. So maybe it's accessible there. But Luis, your question, yeah, we do it almost every day, and it's a controlled shell, which basically walks us through baseline. The first drive is the one I drew. So we do elbow drive. We don't do corner, but you certainly could, to Wayne's point. So we do corner drive, elbow drive, kick, weak side baseline drive, kick. Now the opposite side baseline drive, kick. Now it's the opposite elbow drive, kick, and corner 3. And that's all done in a controlled setting, just to force the peel switching and to force essentially every drive angle, right? You've got the 2 elbow drives, the 2 baseline drives. So without me drawing all that, hopefully people could follow what I was talking about there. Okay, Gino, how do you defend mismatch situation? I feel like that's the same question again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I popped again there. Julio, is the peel switch defense more effective when the players are positionless, like the Warriors or Rockets? Yes, I would say yes, and that goes to the questions about implementing at the high school level. I think that's where it's best suited. The more similar you are, the more naturally inclined they are to switch. I think you're already kind of seeing it. Like even teams that don't peel switch, you see definitely a lot of 2 through 4 switching, and depending on the size of your point guard, 1 through 4, and then now to your point with the Warriors and the Rockets, where they're rolling out 6, 7, 5 men. They're doing it 2 through 5. If you have a big point guard, 1 through 5. So yeah, I think if you have that team, for sure, or if you wanted to recruit to the system, then yeah, I think that is how you would do it. Sorry, all this talking, I gotta get some water here. What if your weakest helper always ends up with the peel switch? It doesn't matter. So you're peeling because you're beaten. So having the weakest guy end up on the ball and then he gets beat just puts you into another peel switch. So going back to that high school point, right, where there's no shot clock, and then that that's what it looked like, is like just nonstop peeling. Okay, let's see. Doris, what are the most effective defense in elementary level and in the high school level? Is it a press or a zone defense? Okay, so I'm going to address this, even though this is not peel switch. So this person lists, what is the most effective defense in the elementary and high school level? Is it press or zone defense? Neither. And in fact, I am a very, very strong advocate that those defenses be banned at the junior levels. So we have to remember that, even peel switching are teaching man-to-man principles, right? So we're not intentionally trying to get beat off the ball. We are teaching rotation. That's skill development. And that's, to me, a huge issue in the United States. Although I don't know where this coach is from. But I think if you look at countries with smaller populations that have a lot of success, a big reason is because they don't allow their teams to zone. So Serbia and Lithuania immediately jump out in my mind. You know, these are countries with very small populations, and they ban zone defenses, you know, all entirely through youth levels. Think we should do the same. USA Basketball released their recommendations almost a year ago, and I really like them, but they now need to be implemented. And essentially what they said, and I agree completely, no zone defenses, but also lower the baskets. I think that's really important for youth players. It's just hard. They're just not, you know, very few kids can on a 10-foot basket shoot with correct form from any distance at all. So, you know, having kids play on smaller baskets with man-to-man defense is really, really important. And just since I'm on the topic, then in terms of skill development at the youth level, smaller sided games. So 5-on-5, kids can hide, kids don't get the ball. You know, typically you see like the kid who grew earlier than everybody else just dominate play, right? Like getting them into 2-on-2, 3-on-3 situations. Because if you think about it, that really is also conceptually how the game is played. So pick and roll, you know, pin down actions, all of that. And then now when you want to introduce weak side rotation, here comes the third, you know, player concepts. You know, that's how I'd be going in youth development. So I just gave Gillis the template for dominating global basketball in 10 years from now. Okay, sorry, I got sidetracked on that one, but let's see. Oh, Nelly's on here too. Okay, Nelson Taroba, another great coach. Nelly and I worked together at the University of Texas. Also was with me at Bakersfield. Currently is an assistant coach with the Texas Legends for another former staff member of mine, George Galanopoulos. Nelly's really, really smart, so I'm sure this is gonna be a good question. Nelly, I just hyped this guy up, and he threw out the biggest I can't repeat question out there. So well played, Nelson. You got me there. Coach Dan, how handle players with lesser talent in a team? Okay. I think it depends on what level you're coaching at. So this is sort of follow up to our whole like development deal that we kind of went down on. I think we miss on that in a big way. I think the U.S. system is really, really flawed. Now, what we have and why we are, you know, ranked number one in the world is simply a numbers game. We have a lot of athletes that play basketball in our country, but I think how we go about the development of them is not really the most, you know, productive way in doing it. Again, I would point the model to, you know, where are places with small populations who are having tons of success. I would want to emulate that. You know, I'll just throw this example out. You know, I talked about Lithuania and Serbia. There's a great couple of great articles. I wish I could tell you exactly where you could find them, but I'm sure Google will get you there. But a couple of articles on the development of Belgian soccer. So, you know, for all the football fans out there, you know, Belgium obviously kind of came out of nowhere and suddenly, you know, became a real power in the world of soccer. I keep saying soccer, but, you know, the majority of coaches on this would say football. And so that, you know, people went back to study, well, like, hey, how did this happen? And to your point about how do you handle players with lesser talent. So one of the big takeaways that applies to that they did in Belgium was to really have like a participation model. So their whole thing was at the youth level, the single most important thing is to have them enjoy the game. So it is simply about like how many players can you get playing basketball and enjoying it. And as they advance, you'll eventually sort it out. But what they saw was the players who became what are, you know, now considered their star players, the majority of them were never identified as being star players when they were in their youth levels. And there's another really, really good study about this. Want to make sure I credit in the book. I think this was by Adam Grant. Maybe I might be giving credit to the wrong person, but essentially the study was they took teachers and kindergarten through fourth grade levels, so young level kids. And what they did was they told the teachers that in their class they had a certain number of elite students. You know, these were kids that had been identified as special and should be receiving advanced level teaching. And what the study found was, sure enough, the students who were, the teacher was told were advanced, tested higher, and on reading, math, science, advanced quicker than the other students in the classroom. Now, here's the takeaway. There was nothing about those students that were tested as advanced prior to the teachers being told that they were. So the takeaway is that simply because the teacher thought that, okay, Jimmy here is, an advanced level student, they taught them in an entirely different way than the rest of the students in the class. And that's the takeaway from all of this, is that you don't know. At the youth level, you do not know who's going to end up being your star player when they hit, 20, 21 years old. And the mistake we make is we try to whittle it down right away. And in the US, we get away with it because we have so many players to choose from. But when you look at Belgium or you look at these other countries, it's participation. So that was a really long answer to your question, but just kind of building on this development stuff. So if I have a lesser talented player on my team, if I'm a youth coach, then how you handle them, you put them in scenarios for success. And that means, I go to small-sided games where they're matched up against players that they can, have success against. So if I'm coaching a youth team and I've got one player because physically they've advanced quicker than everybody else, I need to set up my practices so it's not just this one kid dominating everybody while we just kind of run around and chase them. So anyway, sorry, that was a long answer to that. But Federic, I'm coaching a 15 under boys team and our defense is anchored on a man-to-man box and one hybrid. Do you think we could transition to Peel's system with ease? I don't know. Your box and one hybrid, I don't know. I don't know what your concepts are, but I think as with anything, when you talk about transitioning to peel switch system with ease, nothing is done with ease. So whatever you emphasize as a coach is what your team is going to be good at. And you have to decide, what is it that is going to help your team the most. So I was asked, Ariel wanted me to talk about peel switch, which is, why we're doing it. We identified peel switching as an area that was going to help us with Angola. I do think at the youth levels, and if you have a team with similar size, if you have a team that communicates well, that's going to really help. I think if you have a team that pressures the ball a lot, also is going to really help. But to your question, with Mighty Sport, we didn't use peel switch. So, we had Andre Blatch and Ronaldo Buckme, and we had veteran players playing a lot of minutes. We thought we were going to have Kai Soto too. Like, it wouldn't have made sense for us with that group of guys. So, to your question, you have to figure out what you want to implement and then be committed to the work to implement it. Carlos, is it advisable to train players to switch all the way in order to stop three-pointers? Also have a good mentality that anyone can stop anyone. Would you recommend? Okay. Not sure I fully understand that question, but I don't understand the switch all the way part, but the point about the mentality that anyone can stop anyone is important. And to me, that's the balance of the peel switch. And that goes back to Coach Michelle's point. So if you have somebody stay on the ball too long as it's penetrated, you're going to be in trouble because that's going to put them into a long closeout on the peel switch. And that's not good. To your point, Carlos, if you have somebody that's like, and this can happen, that's like, I don't have to guard the ball because we peel switch everything. And it's literally just like Ole defense. I think that's a problem too. So that's why I kind of go to, I like if you're going to be a pressure team because now at least there is some effort on the ball. But you have to really like strongly implement the communication part, and you have to really be on the guys who you do feel maybe aren't giving effort to stop it. There's no question the best defensive system in the world is guarding your own man, period. You have 5 guys that never need help. They can stay on their own guys. That is the best system there is, right? Hands down. And if you look at any defensive system, it's always better with better defensive players in it, period. Right? So, that's just fact, whatever your system is. So, to your point, Carlos, I think you do, keep an eye on it. If you have somebody that you feel like is getting beat because of lack of effort, you do need to jump on that. Atot, I'm probably killing like the pronunciations of these names, but Atot, your thoughts of peel switching on a drop ball screen D scenario, one guy switching on ball and peel switching to helper's guy. Yeah, okay. That's called next switching, and you're starting to see that happen more and more in Europe. I think if you want to see examples of it, I would watch the Croatian national team from last summer. They were doing it. They brought their B team, because they knew they were out. They knew they weren't going to qualify. They were out of the World Cup. So they played with their younger guys to give them experience, and they played in the NBA Summer League. So I'm going to diagram that one. So basically what they do, this is what he's talking about. Okay, so we have spread, pick and roll. All right. Big comes to set here. Let's put, big on the other side since he's coming this way. So you've got your big and a drop. You can see where this nail help is. All right. So he's saying, hey, couldn't you just do the peel switch in the pick and roll defense? And absolutely you can, but I'm going to show you two different ways, or two different thoughts on it. One is the thought that I said initially. If this is a non-shooter, then that's a natural peel in a clog situation, just like you said. You don't have to involve the big at all because these two could handle it just like they would have if there was no ball screen and he was in a clog. Okay? So now here's where it's different. So this next concept that you see Croatia and some other European teams doing, hold on. I have a hard time reaching around and drawing here. Okay, so now in this next concept, let's say that is a shooter. So no matter what, they're coming off of this guy with the nail help. So even if that's Steph Curry, now what that forces them to do, you can already tell, is to rotate to that. And then now the peel is to the corner. So that's next coverage. So that's what Croatia would do. So the big will always stay down. You've got nail help. There's the switch on the ball. And then now instead of what would our traditional peel switch be, which would be right here, they're coming to a corner. He's coming corner up. So it'd be pass here to here. Now on this, I think it's also important that you do what I would call bracketing, which is your closeout needs to be in the passing lane of the corner. Ariel, can you see that? Just so I know, like
Yes,
the
yes.
diagram. Okay. So what I mean by that, right? If you close out and you close out into a no middle stance, you're allowing that guy to just catch and immediately swing it to a corner. All right. Now that's a long closeout. So for me, I'm about trying to limit long closeouts, but I think that defense is really interesting. I think it is definitely really interesting if you have like Rudy Gobert type of rim protector, somebody, and we see it a lot at the international level, right? Like somebody's huge that you just want to stay in the paint. You see it at the NBA level too. I think as you get maybe a little bit lower down and you don't have like that kind of rim protector, or you have a team where, your bigs are really mobile, to me, creating the long closeout to the corner is not worth it. But anyway, that's sort of referred to as next coverage, but
Yes.
that's what it
Yeah.
looks like.
I think there were questions about it also from Jordan, all the way from Malaysia.
Okay.
Same question.
Yeah, and he's calling it a European switch. Yep. So hopefully that would answer it. Benjamin is asking for our ball screen rules and peel switch. Okay. Wait, did you just delete him?
I think you answered his question. You see.
No, I didn't say what we did.
All right. Sorry.
That's all right. Okay,
So
so
it can come back. So
Oh,
ball
man, but
screen rules in the peel switch defense.
okay, I'm gonna try to quick hit that. So for us, we're gonna be with our fives into a traditional drop with what NBA teams are calling a veer, but for us, because we're using the switch terminology already, is a late switch. And so for us, with our fives, right? So our fives are in these drop coverages. Their fives are rolling. We're staying with the ball until we know that we can't get to it. All right. But here's what I'm learning more and more. I know some teams have rules about, okay, if you're not back in front by the free throw line, and believe me, I've used all these rules in the past. If you're not back in front by the free throw line, automatic switch, or if there's an NBA team, I don't want to say who, I'll get in trouble, but if you see his butt, then switch, right? Kind of same concept. Like you're not gonna get back in front if you've beaten that far. So the butt of the ball handler, right? What I sort of am leaning towards, and what I've seen in my own experience, is the later the switch, the better. Because you want to get, like, the further down the ball handler goes, the more their passing lanes are starting to shrink. So those early switches, these guys are good. They're really good, and they see them, and they're catching you in these kind of in between lobs, right? Like it's really challenging. And then the other part too, I know the concept of we'll live with the mid range, but like when you're just dropped all the way, in here, and then you leave the ball early, like that completely unguarded mid-range, like I'm not a huge fan of that. And I think it leads to, floaters and stuff in the paint, which could be eliminated. So I like staying on that hip later. And then we're keeping it within the same concept of communication. I'm going to wait until the big or the guy on the ball calls it. And honestly, like, it just goes to what I said earlier about your strengths as a player, So I think if we put them in a box with a hard rule on when they switch, you lose out on some stuff. There's some players who are really, really good at like sort of that late deflection or late steal. Or let's say you have a point guard with size and length, they can stay on the ball longer. I think there's a lot of things that kind of go into that. So that's our base with our fives. And then with our fours, we're going to triple switch. So I'll just draw that concept quickly. But it's a 4 that comes in sets. We're going to switch with the 4. And then now if they're I'm just going to do the weak side switch part. So that's the big, right? So they've already come off the ball screen. There's the switch, and they want to roll our point guard. Again, we have the smallest starting point guard in the World Cup. They want to roll our point guard out. So that's going to be a triple switch coming from this corner, and that's going to kick him out to the corner. All right. So obviously I could go into a lot more detail on those concepts, but
We're down to our last 10 minutes, so probably last 2 questions before Kinito will wrap it up for you.
okay. Well, I apologize then because there's maybe a lot more that don't.
Yeah, there's a lot to go. I'll email you the questions also. So
What if? All right, another one from Wayne. Okay, Wayne, just hit me up. So I'm gonna try to get to other people since there's so few. Nelly, I'm gonna read yours before I say anything now this time. Okay. So because this is a quick answer. So Nelson's question is, when you train and adopt this as your base, do you ever still trap on the paint drive against an elite player, or is it always a peel switch on a bad beat? It's, for us, always a peel switch. I think even the only scenario where I wouldn't do that is if you have an elite player that never passes the ball. And those are becoming fewer and fewer. So, say what you want about Harden, but he is going to kick that out and is fully capable of those diagonal skips. So maybe at like a lower level, and you have a team that is just like completely dominated by one guy, and that one guy forces shots, then you could not peel and stay on it. Nash, a blow by is a clear point of decision to peel switch. Confusion is when on-ball defender is still on a hip, a penetrator having a chance to cut off. Would there be any part of the floor that could also be a point of decision to peel switch? Let's say that when he gets past free throw line, so it could still be a short recovery or closeout. That's a good question. Kind of to what I've been saying, you got to go on the call. So like deciding an area gets into like a little bit too murky. The only time where I do kind of want an area to be considered is a corner switch. But to me, a corner switch is so special that like that corner guy, like he has time to be thinking about all of those things. A big that's rotating across doesn't have time to then analyze where the ball is before he calls a switch. A guy who's on the ball who is beaten does not have time to think about when he's going to call the switch. So the corner guy who has a non-shooter and realizes he can be in a help position, I think does have enough time to wait on when he says it. But that'd be my answer to that. Frederick, sorry, I've already answered one. Carl, I've answered one. I'm just trying to find a name for somebody I haven't done. Okay, Ron.
Last one before Kinito will wrap it up for us.
Okay, so Ron, we're closing it with you. Since most of the school leagues here in Manila might start much later this year because of the pandemic, what advice would you give to coaches who will plan to adapt this concept given lack of training days? Is it advisable to initially teach this concept to players via Zoom meeting? Wow, good question. So I'm going to take the school league part of what you're saying and focus on that. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. I think, and I think I actually talked about this in the clinic in Manila too, but I think as coaches, when you coach at a youth level, and I would include high school as part of that, you really have to take ownership and pride of the development part of it. And, you know, to me, like, we're coaches, and that means that we're competitive. Just plain and simple, every one of us. That's why we're in it. And I think that you really have to put that in check. And now high school level is also tricky, right? Because you have to win. You know, now you're getting into a part where you have to win. But I go back to these examples. The best programs in the world, the Serbias, the Lithuanias, you know, the places that are doing it with small populations understand the importance of development. They understand the importance of game reps for their youth players. And those coaches, their accolades have nothing to do with their wins and losses. So, you know, Darko, who's not, I don't think on here, but you know, Darko's a good friend, assistant coach with the Phoenix Suns, coach in the G League, was an assistant coach for Serbia in this last World Cup, Serbian coach. But he came out of their youth development system and also worked in Spain. And it has nothing to do with how many games you won. It has everything to do with who are the guys you developed. And, you know, Nelson is on here. Nelly's a part of Snow Valley. So Snow Valley is like a really famous basketball camp in the U.S., you know, started by Herb Livesey. And, you know, Nelly can tell you the most experienced coaches in that camp are always put with the youngest players. And I think, like, we really have to lock in on that. Like, if you're a youth coach, like, don't get hung up on, like, well, you know, being a elementary level, then going to a high school level, then going to a collegiate level means that I'm becoming a better coach. It doesn't. It really doesn't. Like, some of the best coaches in the world are coaching youth. And to me, like, that's like the ability to develop those players is tremendous. And the impact that you can have on those players is tremendous. And it's just different, you know, like, yes, I coach a national team and I, you know, coach in a professional league. So I have different pressures put on me. Like, I have an expectation to win, which is different. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't mean it's better at all. And so that's to your thing, Ron. Like, I know that was a long-winded answer, but, like, I'm thinking about development during this time. So with the pandemic, I'm not trying to put in a system with my guys or girls. Like, what I'm trying to do is anything I can to encourage them to continue their skill development in whatever way it is. And if it might be as simple of you, Ron, like, just connecting with them, you know, and I think that's, like, such a powerful thing we forget about as coaches. Like, it's an awesome opportunity that you have. Everybody on here is a former player, I'm going to assume. And we could all rattle off a coach like that we had as a young player who had a huge impact on our lives today. And, you know, Ron, you're one of those people, you know, like, you're coaching on a level where they're going to be kids that you impact for the rest of their lives. And so that's where I'd want you to focus your attention. Like, right now in this pandemic, these are young people and they're dealing with all kinds of stuff, just like we all are as adults. And I think your focus should be on, like, how do you get them to, feel good about themselves, feel safe in this environment, and still be encouraged to, just participate in basketball in some way. So if you've got fun drills that they can do in the house, that's awesome. Whether it's ball handling, if they can get outside and shoot, like, to me, that's where the focus is. And, I know JB was on here initially. He and I have had these conversations too, with all these NBA teams, right? Like, in the uncertainty of, are they going to get back and start playing, and like kind of the balance of, like, what do you do? And I think he and I agreed, like, it's really hard. Like, even with a professional athlete who you're paying a lot of money to be, focused on winning games, like, in this environment right now, I think we'd be asking a lot of our players to, like, be diving in on any sort of system stuff. I think as a collective group, all of these coaches that are on this, like, that's where I'm encouraging everybody. None of us know when this pandemic's going to end. All of us are trying to figure out ways that we can still contribute. Obviously, lots of industries have been affected, but basketball coaching has been hugely affected right now. We're used to being in a gym and working with our players, and we're not able to do that. And so, stuff like this, Ariel putting this coaching clinic together, I think, the more we can focus on just that giving part of it, that's where I want everyone to be. So that's a long-winded philosophical statement to end this thing. But
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the learning. And Kinito, some parting words, or I
I'm interested to find out what Dr. Villasor has to say.
I just have two questions. One is, Coach has been a part of the Spurs program as a video coordinator. I just wanted to know if he had a pop story. But he can share that.
A pop story? Oh boy. I have lots of pop stories. I'm gonna give you two. I'm gonna give you two pop stories, because I think it's a testament to who he is as a person. I think so many people see, like, this media persona that he puts out there, which is not necessarily a reflection of who he really is as a person. So two stories. First story, the NBA was so different back then, right? Like, I was one of 6 people total on the coaching staff. Today, JB can chime in. There's probably 6 people in your video room in an NBA program now. So, JB, you confirm that?
Yes.
Yeah. So thanks for jumping in. So, back then it was like all hands on deck. So, I'm on the floor in practice, and I don't know anything. So Mike Brown, who later went on to be, head coach of the Cavs and the Lakers. Mike Brown was an assistant there. And, I'm kind of looking at, Pop has, like, sort of a military like system of chain of command, right? So I'm not going to go to Pop with a question. I would go to Bud, Mike Budenholzer, who's the Bucks coach, or Mike Brown, or, I'm going to go to an assistant to be like, what's the deal? So we were doing a drill, and, Tim Duncan is obviously a big part of what we do offensively, and Tim gets double teamed a lot. And Mike's like, Will, go in there and double team Tim. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I'm like pumped up, ready to go, right? Like, this is awesome. Like, I get to participate, right? Not just rebound and pass or whatever. So I'm like stoked. So, they come down the floor, ball goes in the post. Like, I come flying out in my double team, and Pop, like, stops the drill. He's like, Will, get the fuck off the court. And everybody just stopped, like, literally just stops and is laughing hysterically, right? And so like, okay, like if he's like Mr. Gruff guy all the time, like you would take that and be like, oh man, like Will, like that must have sucked. That must have hurt. Like, da, 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 da. Okay, now here's the other story to balance that. So, well, the end of that story being like, you know, the players wouldn't live it down. And so anytime I would like go into the locker room that day, they'd be like, Will, get the fuck out of the locker room, or, you know, whatever the place was. So, but the second story I want to tell, so, you know, it's been documented. Like you know, I was a video coordinator. I was, you know, barely getting by financially. The things are different now. I guess JB could weigh in on that, but I think a video coordinator in today's NBA is paid a lot more than what they were paid back in my day. But so I was living like literally in a commune in like a real like dicey area, and I got my car broken into, like literally like a cinder block was thrown through my back windshield, and they, you know, I didn't have much in there, but they took whatever they could get. And I came out, and this is before playoff. We were preparing for the Mavs in the Western Conference semifinals, and so like I literally came out and was like, oh my god, like that's what my car looked like. So you know, I didn't have time to like clean anything. I had to get to practice. So you know, I had to drive my car with a cinder block in like the back seat and like the back window smashed out and like wheel into this place. And, you know, what can you do? And, you know, so of course people saw it and noticed. And so Pop, you know, didn't say anything to me about it. And I was like, honestly, I was really more just kind of embarrassed, you know, like you don't want to wheel in and like, you know, my car looks like that. And, you know, so Pop didn't say anything about it. And then, you know, we go through practice, coaches meeting, preparation, you know, like your entire workday. And at the end of that day, you know, Pop pulled me aside in a private moment and just said, hey, you know, Will, I didn't even ask, said, Will, I want you to come live in our guest house until the playoffs are over. And you know, that was his subtle way, right, of like kind of understanding sort of where my struggle was at. I mean, because you could see I had my car broken into, and in like a really behind the scenes kind of way. And he wouldn't even want me sharing this with you guys, you know, like, but I mean, just think about that. Like he opened his house up to me. How many NBA head coaches would do that? So I think that's really like the takeaway for all of you. Like, yeah, like, you know, there is an aggressive side to Pop that comes out now and then, but what you don't see is like an unbelievably caring side and an unbelievable ability to connect with people and understand people and have empathy to people.
Coach, thanks for sharing those stories.
Yeah.
I have one more. Yesterday, I asked you a question. 5 qualities that a basketball coach should possess.
Yeah.
Could you give us yours to be successful?
Yeah. You know, I promised you I wouldn't have it written down and just pick up and read. So, so I'm gonna go off the cuff a little bit. But you know, Jeff Van Gundy talked about this a lot. And Jeff, you know, I talked about Snow Valley Camp earlier and how the best coaches were given the youngest player assignments. So the Van Gundys were a part of this camp. So Jeff, Stan was with Miami at that time. And they would coach the youth divisions. So just to give you an idea, like NBA head coaches would come and take the youngest players. But one of the things that I think Jeff has said a couple of times in clinics, or, you know, you could probably find it somewhere, but, you know, you have to be competent at your craft. So that takes preparation. You know, JB will tell you, like, the higher you go up in levels, the more the players are going to test you and test your competence level. And the more that you can give them the right answer, the more trust that you will build with them. But I think also a part of that too is being able to say when you don't know. So the single worst thing you can ever do is give the wrong answer. Right. So if you get, you feel pressured to like just have an answer. And I think a lot of time, I know myself as a young coach made that mistake a lot. Like you feel like you have to have something and then you say something and it's wrong. That sometimes is something you can never recover from with your players. So, being competent in what you're teaching, like be a master of your subject is important. And if you're not a master of your subject, don't try to teach it. So I think that's important for coaches. I also think too, I'm gonna stay on the Van Gundy part and then kind of branch to my own, but talk about that competence level. I think the other part that's important is a dependability. And it's the same thing that I'm talking about. I think this one goes across every level. So, youth players aren't going to probably challenge your competence as much as pros, but for pro players, and honestly, like, JB is on here, like he's one of the best I've been around, like best people period I've been around, but like best coach because of that. Like he is so available to his players, and the level of trust that builds with them is huge. And I think that's important. And that's something I had to learn. I think honestly for me, like that came later. It came later with everything too. Like came later with staff. Nelly is on here. Like, I mean, he could tell you horrible stories. Probably, even believe me, all my staff could tell you, war stories of me making them work so hard. But like the balance part of that too, like being available for them and not just like, obviously I was pushing them and wanted to push them for them to succeed. And maybe, there are times where they didn't see that. And that's what we do with our players, right? That's your job as a coach, is to push people beyond what they think they could have done, right? I think that's what we do as coaches. Your assistants, your staff, your players, like that's what you do. But there's also like that availability part, which, I had to learn and I'm still not great at, but that they know like across the board. So if I'm an assistant coach for somebody, that head coach needs to know that if he tells me to do something, it's going to get done. And it's going to get done to the best of my ability always. That's really important. If I'm a head coach though, like the flip of that, right? Like my players need to know that they can count on me for whatever it is. My staff needs to know that as well. So I think as coaches, like that's probably the hardest thing. When you're a head coach, your players and your assistants don't realize all the other responsibilities that now are dropping in your lap, right? So you show up to your practice and they think like, okay, that's what you do, right? You run practice and you run the game. Like they don't see, behind the scenes, all the things you're doing. But as head coaches, I think it's really important that we don't get lost in that. And I know that there were times for sure where I would. Or if you are lost in that you can communicate that to people, like, hey, I'm having a hard time. Like right now, I'm getting pulled in a lot of different directions. Like I'm going to try to get to you, just can't do it at this stage. I think that's really important. So that competency, that dependability, and tied in competency is that work ethic. Tied in dependability is that work ethic. I feel like that goes without saying. And then for me. I just think as coaches, like you really at the end of the day have to have like a true passion for what you're doing. Like we're all going to hit moments where, we question why we're doing it. Because if you put it on paper, it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Like what we are paid per hour, like no job security, often underappreciated, often like people who don't do our jobs feel like they could do our jobs. There's a lot of tough stuff that goes into being a coach. And, to anybody that, maybe the younger coaches that are on this clinic, like, I think there has to be that, like, you have to really love this. Like, you can't be half in on it. Like, you got to be all in on basketball, but also all in on like wanting to help people, wanting, going back to what I said about like pushing people beyond like what they're capable. That's just got to be like in your blood and wanting to do that. I kind of go to those things. Like, I think you got to have those categories. If you don't have those qualities, I think your effectiveness as a coach, but also like you're probably gonna get burned out. Like, your level of sacrifice is going to be hard, I think, for you over the course of your coaching career.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Coach.
Yeah, no.
And again, we'd like to thank you for sharing Phil Switch and everything about basketball. And again, hopefully we see a lot of you. Kinito, any parting words?
Thank you very much, Coach Will, for that tremendous learning experience. I mean, for what you shared with us and shared with all those who asked you questions, I thought this was incredible. We learned a lot, not just about the game of basketball, but also the heart you need to have to be able to be successful as a coach and as a mentor. What I'd like to find out is some future time is, you've preached about communication and defense. I'd like to find out what you have to say about offense, because there's going to be a lot of communication in offense too. Whatever that system is, worked against the Philippines and that worked for Mighty Sports, we'd like to find out what you have to say about offense, maybe at some later stage. Thanks, Coach Will.
Yeah, well, that's the next clinic then.
Uh-huh.
But real quickly, I did want to just say one thing to everybody that's on here. So this clinic, right, was formed by Ariel. Ariel and I are friends from 2012, right? Because he made the effort to come to one of our training camps in Bakersfield. One of the other moderators, Kinito, we formed a friendship at the World Cup that is continuing. And then, I'm answering questions and you heard it, right? When I was doing it, like, Nelly tricks me into some, but, Nelson is on here, Wayne is on here, John Bryant is on here, Emmanuel is on here. So everybody that's on here, like this is also a testament of what is so awesome about coaching. Like, the relationships that you will form, they stay with you for life, and they will take you places you can't even imagine. Just that we're doing this is so cool. And I would love to find out where the participants are from, like not just
not just Philippines. We have participants from Malaysia and Indonesia and Thailand. And there was Tanzania.
Yeah, it's so cool. So I just, as a reminder to everybody, like this, because I feel like, oh man, I kind of like gave like a downer speech as the last thing I said. So I want, in this pandemic time, a pickup speech for everybody. Like, this game will open doors for you that are just so amazing, and are going to create relationships for you that are so amazing and last a lifetime. So I just want to thank you guys for having me be a part of this. Today was awesome. I'm pumped and feeling really good about everything right now.
Yes, we went the full 2 hours, Coach. Congratulations. That was awesome. But, Kinito was up at, we were chatting at 2 a.m. or 2:30 a.m. Last night or last morning. So I was surprised. Oh, you're up this late. So, yeah. So thank you very much, Coach Will. And I know, if the attendees had a great time, and they'll have also a great time with our next webinar on Sunday. I know you know them pretty well. The Coach Mike Taylor, you coach against him in Germany. So he's the coach of Poland. He had that huge win against China at the Worlds, and then he's gonna talk about building concepts, and we have Coach Ryan Panon, who's coaching in the D League, in the G League. He's also gonna talk and about the 3-2 ball screen motion offense, which is very popular now, and also Coach Aaron Fern is gonna talk about flow offense, which is similar to the ball screen offense on Sunday. So hopefully we get to see everyone, and hopefully we get to see you again on Sunday, Coach, if you have time to attend the other clinics. And I'll definitely invite you so to ask questions.
No, those are, like you said, those are three friends of mine, all great coaches.
There you go.
Talking on great subjects. So I think everybody can learn a lot.
Yep. So all right, thank you so much for everyone who stayed up late. It's 1:30 our time, so thank you so much, and we appreciate it. Again, we'd like to thank Blackwater for making this possible. Hoop Coaches International, of course. I'd like to thank the Dean and the Doc for staying with me. Dean and Doc, and of course to Coach Will and to Coach John Bryant. Shout out to you and to all the coaches that attended the clinic. And again, to the frontliners, salute to you. Blackwater has been raising awareness to help the frontliners, especially with the Pasig General Hospital. And if you click on the Blackwater link on Facebook or Instagram, you can help. And that's it. Coach Nas Rosella, our head coach, stayed up till 1:30. Thank you for awesome questions. And to everybody again, we thank you. Thank you, Coach Will.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Coach.
All right. So see you again on Sunday. Again, 6 p.m. Manila time. All right. Bye, Dean. Bye, Doc.
Bye,
Thank
Coach.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you.
Dean.
Thanks.
Good night
Anita.
or good morning. Bye.